Ferris Bueller's Day Off was never just a carefree story about a rebellious teen. It was the beginning of a far darker, hidden saga for its cast. Behind the laughter came triumphs, collapses, scandals, and stunning comebacks that unfolded over nearly 40 years. Let's reveal who they truly were, and honor the legacies they fought so hard to leave behind. Matthew Broderick, as Ferris Bueller. Matthew Broderick became Ferris Bueller in 1986 at just 24, a charming, carefree rebel who embodied the spirit of youth so completely that the entire decade claimed him as its icon. 3 days of filming in Chicago were enough to carve his name into American comedy history. By 2025, at 63, he has returned to Broadway, the place that has always felt like home. But behind the fame was the 1987 crash in Northern Ireland that killed 2 people and left Broderick haunted for decades. The trauma, combined with the pressure of balancing Hollywood films and stage commitments, pushed him into long periods of PTSD and unspoken guilt. His film career continued with The Producers and Glory, yet his heart was constantly torn between success and the lingering pain of the past. Away from the screen, Broderick held on to the rare stability of his marriage to Sara Jessica Parker, which began in 1997, almost unheard of in Hollywood. Even with a strong family life, he still had to navigate the weight of fatherhood alongside the public expectations placed on a Broadway legend. In recent years, he has taken fewer film roles, choosing instead the stage. Today, Matthew Broderick, at 63 years old, continues performing on Broadway and selects only a few film projects. He and Parker share an estimated $200 million net worth, built from decades of stage success and the enduring legacy of the producers. Alan Ruck, as Cameron Fry. Cameron Fry, the fragile, anxious best friend in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 1986, was embodied by Alan Ruck. He was 30 when he stepped into the role, capturing a lifetime of fear and longing in a single trembling stare at a red Ferrari. That vulnerability would follow him far beyond the screen. Born July 1, 1956 in Cleveland, Ohio, Ruck built his career on determination shaped by years of obscurity and emotional strain. His first marriage to Claudia Stephanie unraveled after 2 decades, a breakup that forced him to navigate co-parenting while wrestling with lingering depression triggered by years of minor roles and stalled momentum. When he later married actress Mireille Enos, the stability softened parts of his life he once believed were permanently fractured. In the years following Ferris Bueller, exhaustion from constant supporting roles pushed him to the edge of leaving the industry. Yet, performances in Speed and Twister offered brief lifelines before his career surged again with Succession, which earned him Emmy and Golden Globe nominations. Despite the pressure of constant work, he avoided major illness, though the emotional burnout of his early career left shadows that lingered long into middle age. Today, Ruck is 69 years old, still acting and finally receiving the recognition that eluded him for decades. He divides his time between family, selective roles, and a slower pace that lets him savor the success he once doubted would ever come. His net worth stands at approximately $12 million USD, the product of perseverance, reinvention, and a late career renaissance. MIA Sara, as Sloane Peterson. Sloane Peterson, the serene, impossibly composed girlfriend in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 1986, was portrayed by Mia Sara. She was 19 when she stepped into the role, embodying a calm that felt effortless on screen but nearly impossible in her real life. Behind her smile was a young actress already buckling under the fear of fame arriving too fast. Born June 19, 1967, in Brooklyn Heights, New York, Sara moved through Hollywood with a quiet fragility masked by beauty and talent. Her marriage to Jason Connery unraveled in 2002, leaving her to raise their son while carrying the emotional bruises left by a union strained by long separations and growing artistic differences. When she later found stability with Brian Henson, the shift allowed her to step back from acting and reclaim parts of herself she felt had been consumed by early success. Years of pressure had taught her that gentleness often costs more than it appears. Her decision in 2013 to walk away from Hollywood came after mounting anxiety and exhaustion from decades of public expectation. Though she had starred in Legend and won a Saturn Award for Time Cop, the constant movement and scrutiny of the industry left her craving silence. She turned instead to poetry, horses, and rural life. Even her cautious return in The Life of Chuck, 2024, was a small, deliberate step. Today, Sara is 58 years old, living in the English countryside and devoting her days to writing, motherhood, and farm work, far removed from Hollywood's noise. Her life now is one of privacy and intention, built around peace rather than performance. Together with her husband, Brian Henson, she holds a combined net worth of approximately $50 million, a quiet fortune supporting a life she has chosen rather than escaped into. Lyman Ward as Tom Bueller. Tom Bueller, the oblivious suburban father in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 1986, was embodied on screen by Lyman Ward. He was 45 when he stepped into the role, grounding the teenage chaos with a steady but unsuspecting warmth. That calm exterior made it easy to forget how fragile the man behind it truly was. Born June 21, 1941, in St. John, New Brunswick, Ward entered adulthood with a quiet restraint that often hid the emotional storms underneath. 3 marriages collapsed under the weight of mismatched expectations, especially the one with Cindy Pickett, which deteriorated into draining custody negotiations that tested his ability to remain steady for his 2 children. The end of that relationship left him carrying a heaviness he rarely spoke aloud. In later years, he acknowledged privately that the emotional fallout shaped how cautiously he approached love thereafter. The strain of these personal battles intertwined with years of minor injuries from long-term acting work, leaving his body slower and more deliberate than before. Yet, he held on to the small triumphs, roles in Not Another Teen Movie and Independence Day, as proof that he still belonged in the craft he had spent his life pursuing. Those roles gave him brief moments of validation at times when self-doubt threatened to hollow him out. By 2025, Ward is 84 years old, embracing smaller roles with a gentleness that reflects the life he has survived. His later days are calmer, shaped by acceptance rather than ambition, and he remains close to the children who once lived at the center of so much turmoil. He now moves through the industry at his own pace, grateful simply to keep working. His net worth, accumulated carefully across decades of modest but steady work, rests around $2 million. Jeffrey Jones as Ed Rooney. Ed Rooney, the obsessive, combative principal in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 1986, was portrayed by Jeffrey Jones. He was 40 when he stepped into the role, embodying a character so comically hateful that he became instantly iconic. No one watching him chase Ferris across Chicago could imagine how dark his real story would become. Born September 28, 1946, in Buffalo, New York, Jones entered adulthood with ambitions shaped as much by theater as by the quiet vulnerabilities he carried privately. His marriage to voice coach Loy Kautz eventually collapsed under mounting career pressure, leaving their son Julian navigating the emotional distance that followed the breakup. The scandal of 2002 shattered what stability remained, isolating Jones from colleagues and community alike. Even before the scandal, his struggle with depression had intensified during years of increasing personal dissatisfaction. The aftermath of his legal downfall became a second kind of sentence, one marked by therapy, social exile, and the quiet regret of a man unable to step back into the world he once moved so confidently through. Illnesses tied to stress and aging made his days slower, forcing him to retreat into isolation. Only a handful of roles, including Amadeus and Beetlejuice, continued to remind audiences of the talent buried beneath the controversy. That contrast became the defining tragedy of his later life. Today, Jones is 79 years old, living quietly and avoiding public appearances while adhering to the restrictions of lifelong offender registration. His net worth, diminished by legal fees and career collapse, stands at approximately $2 million. Virginia capers as Florence Sparrow. Florence Sparrow, the warm, quick-witted school nurse in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 1986, was brought to life by Virginia capers. She was 61 when she appeared in the film, offering only a brief moment on screen but leaving behind a presence shaped by decades of endurance. Behind her gentle smile lay a lifetime of private pain. Born September 22, 1925 in Sumter, South Carolina, Capers journeyed into adulthood with a voice strong enough for Broadway, yet a heart that endured deep solitude. Her marriage ended quietly, leaving her to navigate both her career and motherhood largely on her own, with emotional weight collecting in the silence of her offstage life. That solitude intensified as her son grew older, leaving her home feeling increasingly hollow. She often poured her remaining warmth into young actors she mentored, hoping to give them the support she never received. As chronic lung disease tightened its grip, each breath carried more effort than the last, forcing her to push through rehearsals with a discipline that bordered on heroic. She still managed to craft unforgettable performances, including Lady Sings the Blues and her acclaimed narration in Gabriel Knight, Sins of the Fathers. Those moments gave her brief escapes from the reality of her weakening lungs. Still, her illness progressed faster than her career could sustain her, creating a heartbreaking contrast between her power as an artist and the fragility of her body. Sadly, Capers died on May 6, 2004, at age 78, after pneumonia overwhelmed a body already exhausted by years of respiratory decline. Her final days were spent preparing for a tribute performance she never managed to complete. Her net worth at the time, built from decades of stage and screen work, stood at approximately $1.5 million. Ben Stein as economics teacher. The economics teacher, the monotone, unforgettable presence in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 1986, was delivered on screen by Ben Stein. He was 42 when he stepped into the role, turning a single classroom scene into one of the most quoted moments in 80s cinema. What the audience never saw was how different the real man was from the droning figure they laughed at. Born November 25, 1944, in Washington, D.C., Ben Stein carried into adulthood a life shaped by sharp intellect and private turbulence. His long marriage to attorney Alexandra Denman survived separation, reconciliation, and decades of political disagreements that often strained the quiet stability of their home. Yet they remained tethered by loyalty and the adopted son they raised together. Behind that calm public exterior, Stein battled chronic arthritis that tightened around his joints as he aged, making travel and movement increasingly painful. Even so, he continued working, using writing as both refuge and rebellion. His illness grew heavier during years when controversy swirled around him, but Stein poured his remaining energy into creative work, finding solace in Win Ben Stein's Money and Ghostbusters 2. Each television taping became a test of both stamina and spirit, especially when walking or standing triggered sharp spikes of pain. Yet Stein kept showing up, determined not to be diminished by the body that was slowly resisting him. By 2025, Stein is 81 years old, still writing, still lecturing, still absorbing the weight of a world that has never quite known where to place him. He spends more time at home now, moving carefully, guarded by the marriage that endured every fracture and rebuilt itself over time. His later years are quieter but not idle, filled with books, speeches, and the occasional appearance. His net worth, sustained through decades of writing, speaking, and investment, stands at $25 million. Edie McClurg as Grace. Grace, the loyal, bustling school secretary in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 1986, was portrayed by Edie McClurg. She was 41 when she brought the character to life, her warm comedic timing turning a small role into one of the film's most charming beats. The brightness she radiated on screen stood in heartbreaking contrast to the shadows that followed her later in life. Born July 23, 1945 in Kansas City, Missouri, McClurg grew into adulthood with an earnest sweetness that often shaped the roles she was given. She never married, not out of disinterest but out of a life spent caring for extended family and burying herself in work when loneliness pressed hardest. Her later years became more fragile as Alzheimer's crept silently into her memory, unraveling her independence and forcing relatives to intervene with legal guardianship. For a woman who once filled rooms with laughter, losing her own sense of familiarity was a cruelty she never deserved. Her illness deepened during the years when her career was slowing, making her appearances in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and Pixar's Cars franchise feel like distant reminders of the vibrant performer she had been. The devastating 2022 abuse scandal inflicted another wound, stripping away what little trust she still had in those around her and leaving emotional scars that medical care could not touch. Through it all, her family held fiercely to her, protecting her when she no longer could protect herself. Today, McClurg is 80 years old, retired, living under supervised care as her memory continues to fade in unpredictable waves. Her net worth, preserved through decades of film and voice work, stands at $2 million US. D.L. Close as English teacher. The English teacher, the brief but unforgettable classroom presence in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 1986, was portrayed by Del Close. He was 52 when he appeared in the film, offering only moments on screen yet leaving behind an eerie intellectual weight. Few knew that behind his dry delivery lay one of comedy's most tormented minds. Born March 9, 1934 in Manhattan, Kansas, Close moved into adulthood carrying addictions and emotional wounds that strained every relationship he formed. His 3 marriages collapsed under the weight of heroin, alcohol, and the volatility that ruled his personal life, leaving no children and a long trail of regret in their wake. Chronic COPD, worsened by decades of smoking and drug abuse, slowly choked the breath from his lungs as he aged. Even in illness, he attempted to rebuild trust with those he'd driven away, though reconciliation was often too late to grasp. His health deteriorated during years when he was still teaching improv, even as he struggled to maintain control over his worsening symptoms. Yet he managed flashes of brilliance, with performances in The Untouchables and his celebrated Second City Reviews earning him deep respect and an Obie Award. These brief returns to form became moments of clarity inside a life clouded by addiction and self-destruction. Sadly, Close died on March 4, 1999, at age 64, after COPD overtook him in a Chicago hospital just days before his birthday. His final wish captured the theatrical eccentricity that defined his entire existence. His last years were quiet, marked by poverty, illness, and the care of friends who refused to abandon him. His net worth at the time of his death was approximately $500,000 USD. Cindy Pickett as Katie Bueller. Katie Bueller, the anxious, soft-spoken mother in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 1986, was brought to life by Cindy Pickett. She was 39 when she stepped into the role, grounding the film with a warmth that felt real precisely because her own life was beginning to fracture behind the scenes. It was a performance that seemed effortless, yet it came from a woman quietly carrying more weight than she ever let on. Born April 18, 1947, in Norman, Oklahoma, Pickett entered adulthood shaped by the artistic world of her parents, only to find herself overwhelmed by the emotional toll of her early years on Guiding Light. Her marriage to Lyman Ward collapsed in 1992 after 6 turbulent years, leaving her navigating single motherhood amid bitter custody and financial disputes. The pressure deepened her bouts of depression, pushing her into long stretches away from the industry. Even in private, the stress of rebuilding her life alone often resurfaced in unexpected waves of exhaustion. As she returned to work, age began limiting her mobility, slowing her pace during auditions and long shooting days. Still, she held on to the craft through roles that reminded audiences of her range, including Saint Elsewhere and Deep Star 6. The emotional cost of divorce lingered for years, shaping how she approached relationships, motherhood, and her identity beyond Hollywood. Those who worked with her often sensed the quiet resilience beneath her gentle exterior. In 2025, Pickett is 78 years old, working sporadically while focusing on family and the slow rhythms of a life rebuilt from heartbreak. She remains grateful for the modest stability she carved out after decades of turbulence, living with far less visibility, but far more peace. Her net worth stands at approximately $1 million earned through television roles and steady, if understated, film work. Richard Edson as garage attendant. The mischievous, smooth-talking garage attendant in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 1986, was portrayed by Richard Edson. He was 32 when he took on the role, transforming a brief appearance into one of the movie's most unforgettable surprises. Few viewers knew that the man who sent Cameron's father's Ferrari flying toward disaster had survived plenty of crashes of his own. Born January 1, 1954, in New Rochelle, New York, Edson stepped into adulthood through the gritty underground worlds of punk music and downtown art scenes. Leaving Sonic Youth after internal tension and financial struggle sent him spiraling into instability, he drifted between bands, cheap apartments, and periods of homelessness. Relationships never took root. The chaos of touring, poverty, and self-reinvention made long-term love nearly impossible. Over the years, a serious car accident left both physical scars. Acting gave him a lifeline, but not a safety net. Projects like Stranger Than Paradise and Do the Right Thing gave him cult-status credibility, yet the paychecks were erratic, pushing him into photography and side gigs to survive. He lived alone, relying on art to structure days that might otherwise blur. Even as he continued working, the solitude of his life deepened. By 2025, Edson is 71 years old, devoting most of his time to photography while appearing occasionally in independent films. His world is quieter now, built around art studios and small creative circles rather than movie sets or noisy stages. His net worth is approximately $1 million, accumulated slowly through indie films, music, and decades of artistic persistence. Larry "Flash" Jenkins as garage attendant's co-pilot. The garage attendant's mischievous co-pilot in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 1986, was portrayed by Larry "Flash" Jenkins. He was 31 when he took on the role, turning a quick, silent joyride into an unforgettable burst of reckless energy. But the man flashing that grin had already endured battles far heavier than a stolen Ferrari. Born May 10, 1955, on Long Island, New York, Jenkins entered adulthood with ambition sharpened by the racial barriers surrounding early Hollywood. His marriage to Michelle Jenkins collapsed under financial tension, and 2 later marriages brought even more emotional turmoil as lawsuits and conflicts strained every attempt at stability. The stress pushed him toward alcohol, a dependency he fought for years while trying to hold on to his career. Even as he attempted recovery, the lingering exhaustion often forced him to step away from acting entirely. Health problems crept into his life during these years, worsened by relentless overwork and the emotional cost of repeated rejection. Still, he found moments of pride through The White Shadow and Fletch, roles that allowed him to glimpse the career he once believed he would have. Behind the camera, he worked furiously to build a slate of independent films, only to watch project after project sink financially. Sadly, Jenkins died on April 25, 2019, at age 63, after a sudden heart attack brought on by long-term cardiac strain. At the time of his death, his net worth was approximately $800,000, much of it earned through acting and his small independent productions. His passing left behind a son and a complicated legacy shaped by resilience, disappointment, and flashes of brilliance that Hollywood never fully recognized. Charlie Sheen as Garth Volbeck. Garth Volbeck, the hollow-eyed troublemaker haunting the police station in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 1986, was embodied by Charlie Sheen. He was 21 when he stepped into the role, staying awake for nearly 48 hours to achieve that unsettling, vacant stare. It was a chilling preview of the chaos that would soon swallow his real life. Born September 3, 1965, in New York City, Sheen grew up under the towering shadow of Martin Sheen while quietly building a career that would later devour him. His marriages to Donna Peel, Denise Richards, and Brooke Mueller collapsed one by one, each ending in accusations, custody battles, and a trail of emotional wreckage that he never fully outran. The collapse of his union with Richards in 2006 exposed the darkest corners of his addictions, while his breakup with Mueller in 2011 came amid restraining orders and the removal of their twin sons. For years, he lived inside courtrooms, rehab centers, and tabloid headlines. His health began to buckle under years of cocaine use, overdoses, and public meltdowns that cost him his fortune and his dignity. The HIV diagnosis he revealed in 2015, carried silently since 2011, shattered him emotionally, but also forced him into sobriety, culminating in a successful rehabilitation by 2017. Even as he delivered acclaimed performances in Platoon and 2.5 Men, the weight of addiction, lawsuits, and extortion payments left him worn down to bone and nerve. His 2011 firing from 2.5 Men, once the highest-paid actor on TV, marked the moment Hollywood finally stepped away. Today, Sheen is 60 years old, living quietly and cautiously, describing his life now as a long recovery in progress. He divides his days between treatment, writing, and rare acting appearances while attempting to rebuild relationships with his children. His net worth, once over $100 million, has dwindled to approximately $3 million, a reminder of how brutally fame and self-destruction carved through everything he once had. Jennifer Grey, as Jeannie Bueller. Jennifer Grey stepped into the role of Jeannie Bueller, the jealous, sharp-tongued sister always on the edge of exploding, in Ferris Bueller's Day Off in 1986 when she was just 26. 3 lines of dialogue and an avalanche of attitude made her one of the film's most unexpected standouts. However, Grey carried a tragedy the public never truly saw: a 1989 nose surgery that shattered her career overnight, leaving all of Hollywood unable to recognize the star who once shone in Dirty Dancing, 1987. That loss spiraled into years of depression and panic attacks over the feeling of disappearing in plain sight. The strain in her marriage to Clark Gregg and their 2020 divorce only widened the wound. Quietly, she fought to rebuild herself from the very mistake the world once mocked. Adding to that burden, the thyroid cancer discovered in 2010 forced Grey to confront the line between life and death, a shock that reshaped both her mind and her priorities. Even so, she still carved out moments of triumph, winning Dancing with the Stars in 2010 and maintaining the aura of the woman who helped make Dirty Dancing legendary. But behind every bright moment were years of struggling against invisible fear. By 2025, at 65, she lives quietly in Los Angeles, writing and continuing therapy to keep her emotional balance. Her memoir Out of the Corner gave her a voice that Hollywood once took from her. Her net worth is estimated at around $10 million, earned from royalties, television work, and her writing projects. Behind every smile on screen is a battle we never see. So now that you know what these actors truly lived through, Whose journey moved you the most? Share your thoughts below and make sure to subscribe so you never miss our next deep dive.